All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce Mark Borsheim. Mark is VP of ERP systems for Nordic Global. He has many years experience as a consultant working with ERP systems, both Infor and Workday. And Nordic Global, his employer, also utilizes Workday themselves. So he brings a nice, interesting perspective for all of us. So thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
So in your experience, what are some key advantages of using Workday software for hospital management compared to traditional systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the key things that really Workday, I'd say, kind of led the field in is cloud computing, right? It was really the first cloud-based ERP platform out there. Pretty much all of them have gone that route now, and that was good for two reasons. One, it's a lot more scalable from a cost perspective. If you traditionally had to host those ERP systems on premise in your own server farm, servers are expensive to run and maintain and upgrade, etc. They're also more vulnerable when they're on their own. In a large cloud environment, you can use the absolute best security and encryption possible to keep your data secure along with everybody else's. So that's been critical for healthcare in particular, where, as you guys know, security, data protection is critical as a part of your day-to-day HIPAA requirements, etc. So being able to put it in a more scalable cloud environment has been a big win for healthcare organizations and other industries as well, especially as you start to get into wanting to be able to access that data from anywhere. That's the other great thing about the cloud is I don't have to be physically attached to that server or at a location, especially in a world where we've gotten a lot of consolidation in healthcare. There's a lot of facilities across regions now, not even just your local hospital. So being able to all have everybody synced up on the same page is pretty critical in making decisions and also managing those systems.
Are there any risks?
Any risks? Sure. Well, I mean, like
Yeah.
anything, people are risk. We certainly, security is only as good as those that are following those security protocols. Another factor which has come up as a risk is for folks that maybe are in areas susceptible to internet outages. We have several, like one of our clients is Bermuda Hospital out on, an island of Bermuda. And if the internet goes down to the island, their access to the cloud is also disrupted. It has happened. It's rare, but it has happened. It's important for any healthcare organization, whether they're on an island or any place that might have suspect internet access, or to have protocols in place to be able to survive those periods of time where they have to go back to the old pen and paper to track things and then be able to get that information back in the system once things go live. So I'd say that's probably the biggest risk with everything in the cloud. Obviously, your traditional security risks are still there. Two-factor authentication, making sure everything is encrypted at your data points, so as in like your personal laptops and etc. Those security protocols are important because essentially anybody, if they can get access to your credentials, depending on what you have access to, can then get access to the entire system. So that's probably the biggest security risk, which is why cybersecurity is such a big topic generally all the time now. As things go increasingly to the cloud, making sure that security is a main point of focus in the business world all the way down to the end user is a pretty significant thing.
So the main thing I wanted to ask is, how has the technology changed ever since you started in the industry, and how has it changed up to this point?
Yeah. Good question. I started using ERP systems back in 2005 as an end user. I started with a system called Lawson, and besides the very different look of those systems, now everything's very GUI. You've got your web-based interfaces for everything. Generally everything looks like a web page now, right, in terms of how you access it. Traditionally, when I started, everything still had green screens, right, where you had a black screen, you had key commands that you had to put in for things. It wasn't even all mouse based. You had to know the shortcuts. Now everything is much more user friendly. You don't need to have memorized shortcuts. So just generally the amount of time it takes to train somebody up on how to use an ERP system has dramatically dropped in the time since I started doing this versus how it is now, which is great because it's a less of an investment to have to. I shouldn't have to if I'm trying to bring on, let's say, a new accountant or a new person in my warehouse to learn how to use the system. If I'm having to spend most of that time just teaching you how to navigate it and interface it, you're not actually learning how to make that system work best for your business to create efficiencies and improve profitability. So I would say, yeah, from the beginning to now, it's night and day, just in terms of how you access it. And obviously, like I said before, everything was hosted on local servers, right? So I physically, when I was a consultant at the beginning, I always had to travel everywhere because I basically had to be wherever the server was, or at a point where I could access that server behind somebody's firewall. But now everybody's remote, everything's hosted in the cloud anyways, so I can generally be working, preferably on a beach somewhere, accessing that system rather than sitting in an office somewhere. So that's been probably the biggest change, is just that flexibility, that ability to just work anywhere.
So what are your predictions for the future? So what do you think is going to change going forward?
Yeah, so well, in healthcare particularly, the big term that everybody throws around is interoperability. It's merging those ERP systems that I focus on more with those revenue producing systems in healthcare like Epic and Cerner. So those are kind of Meditech. Those are some of the big patient billing and scheduling systems. Because to really get power out of those ERP systems, I need the full picture. I want to see the entire revenue cycle. I want to be able to know exactly what this hip replacement is going to cost from all the way from the cost side to the physician side to the revenue side, right? I want to put all of those pieces together so I can actually make real-time predictions and decisions based on those actual metrics. So merging those pieces together in real time continues to be more and more what we see kind of coming in the near term for ERP systems. That's one of our major focuses at Nordic is actually working with Epic in particular to try to merge with Workday and have a platform that we can give to everybody from a CEO to a doctor to be able to see in real time all that information, not having to wait for it to batch or do month-end close and all that stuff. It's all about having information quickly and completely. So I see that, if anything, continuing to accelerate.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, could you elaborate on how Workday integrates various functions like human resources, finance, and how supply chain management into a single platform for hospitals?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely one of the big benefits of any kind of an integrated ERP system is being able to leverage all those things. So you take from the HR perspective. Actually, you know what? Let's start from the supply chain perspective. If I'm a supply chain person in a warehouse, I am going to get a request, right, for an item. So that request is going to turn into potentially a purchase order on the supply chain side. Now, that purchase order is going to need to go through an approval process, which kind of centers back to the ERP system, because on the HR system, I have a person who's responsible for, let's say, approving purchases. I guess I'll go back to the hip example for hips, replacement hips. So they're going to get a purchase order. They'll approve that purchase order on the HR system automatically. So it'll just come through electronically to their inbox. That purchase order then will create that request over in supply chain to go, and if they don't already have inventory for that item, to go and order it from a vendor. That vendor, let's say, then creates an invoice to get payment for said piece of merchandise, which will go to finance. And finance gets an invoice, and instead of actually having to figure out, okay, well, who paid for this, who authorized this, it's automatic. That invoice will be matched automatically with the purchase order, which will then match to the payment. We call that a three-way match. So vendor gets paid, matched invoice, hip gets sent over to doctor for successful surgery. And all of those items happen automatically within the system. There's no paperwork needed, which is definitely a big benefit of having an integrated ERP system, because there's no need to build either manual interfaces between those systems or have to worry about things getting, lost in the fray, so to speak. When everything was manual, you're opening up for the potential for both fraud and human error. So having a clear audit trail of electronic documents is much less likely to open up to either of those things.
In your experience, what are some key advantages of using Workday software for hospital management compared to a traditional system?
Sure. Yeah, Workday, again, was sort of the first one that really revolutionized cloud computing for ERP, which was something that, just was unheard of in this industry probably 10 years ago. Now it's every industry, every other ERP system has followed suit and is trying to do the same thing. And that's been good for two reasons. One is it's allowed hospitals to focus on what they're good at, which is running a hospital, and not worry about running an IT department, right? Running a server farm. That's basically outsourced that work to the cloud and to a company like Workday, who leverages companies like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure to host those things. So they can focus your business on the core thing that your business is about, which is healthcare, and not managing your technology systems, right? So that's kind of one of the main things. The other thing is the scalability. Traditionally, when you did have to host your own server and own system, you would have to make sure that your servers were up to the latest security patches, the latest versions, as well as the software. In the cloud, all patches and security protocols are the latest and greatest. They're automatically applied. You might have to do a little bit of testing on your own when those patch cycles come through, but otherwise you're always using the latest and greatest security protocols. And system basically functions as well. New functionality comes out and it's there at your doorstep to be used or not used right away. So that's another one of the major key components there. It also just costs less overall to use a hosted solution where you're only paying for the size system that you really need versus necessarily having to host your own system, which sometimes you may or may not have sized correctly. And if you have to scale it, you might have to buy a whole new system versus the cloud where you're basically just turning a spigot and it's just putting on a little bit more water because you're using the shared resources of the cloud. So from a growth perspective, it makes it a lot easier to keep your system right-sized with where your system is or your healthcare system is. So I hope I answered that. I'm trying to keep it concise.
I'd like to thank you for joining us, Mark. We appreciate the time and the insights.
Anytime, it's what I do.
Literally. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.